Hi, and welcome to this first in a series of videos to show you how you can use microServiceBus to manage your IoT devices in IoT Hub. Now in this first video, I thought it would be a good idea to actually get started without using microServiceBus. And in that way, we can build a solution and we can reflect on it afterwards to see what are the missing pieces that we have before moving into a production-like scenario. So there is a number of other videos that we really recommend you to use. Each of which, of course, goes into more detail on different challenges that you may or may not come across moving forward. The solution that we're going to build here in this video is going to be very simple. We're going to have a device. We're going to have an IoT hub, we're going to have a routing mechanism, and we're going to have a reporting tool. And for this demo, we're going to use a Raspberry Pi, not because it's a particularly good IoT device, but because, as many of you already have one, we have an attached temperature sensor to this one, and we're going to submit that data up to the Azure IoT Hub, and we're going to use Azure throughout this solution, although microServiceBus works for other vendors as well. Now for the routing mechanism, we're going to use this Azure Stream Analytics, which is kind of an overkill in this scenario, but it works very nicely with Power BI that we're going to use to show the outcome of our demo. So to do all that, we need to create an Azure IoT Hub and an Azure Stream Analytics job. Now I've already done that for you, but I'm going to go through, show you the steps of how to create those before we begin. And then we're going to build our application. We're going to do that using Node.js and JavaScript. There are many other platforms and languages that you may use. I prefer Node.js along with C, as I think those are the best candidates for your applications, and we're going to go through more in detail why that is later on in the other modules. And we're going to deploy the application to the Raspberry Pi, and then we're going to run the application and view the output in Power BI. So let's get started. So this is the Azure portal. And to create an IoT Hub, we come up to create a resource, type IoT Hub in the search box, click create, give it a name, select a pricing tier. You have one free hub per subscription, or you can choose any of the other options. You assign it a resource group and select the location and click create. And the same is also true for Stream Analytics. Stream Analytics job, click create, give it a name, assign it a resource group, and select the location. And you can set the streaming units later on. You can pin it to the dashboard, and you can click create. Now, as I said, I've already created these resources. So if we come into my IoT Hub, we can scroll down the list to the IoT devices. And we can create a new device by clicking the add button, give the device a name. We can select any of the different authentication types. I'm gonna stick with the default and just click save. Then we can click on this device and we can see the different keys or connection strings that we're gonna use later on. Now for this demo, we have the Raspberry Pi and have an attached temperature sensor. That is an 18x20 sensor, which is very common. And coming into the NPM package manager, Node package manager, we can search for the X20. Here we get a lot of information about how to use this one. Now, I've prepared some of the steps in Visual Studio Code. So let's go to Visual Studio Code, and what you see here is the first is the required statement of using that particular package. Then we load the driver. That we may have any number of sensors, so we get a list of sensors. In our case, we only have one. And then I go into an interval of every 3 seconds where I read out the temperature of that particular sensor. And then we just print that out to the console. Now, if I was to deploy this one, we're going to have a deployed script. So we deploy this to my Raspberry Pi. We're done. So now we can come into my Raspberry Pi. So this is an SSH session into my Pi. The ls here, we see those are my my files. The first thing we need to do is installing that package, PS18X20, and I also use the color package, so let's add that as well. So that takes a few seconds, and we're done. So we should now be able to run this application, typing node app. The driver is loaded, and we should see temperatures coming through every 3 seconds. So if I hold this one very hard, temperature, I should be able to see the actual temperatures coming up here. So 25, 26. Okay, so we see that working. And we're ready to move on to using Azure IoT Hub to send those messages up to Azure. Now to do that, let's just begin with putting all this into a function. So tuck that away a little bit and actually move that one because that one is the other packages from. So here I have a snippet that is actually, let's go through this. The first thing we need is a connection string. So we already had that in the portal. So let's copy that one. This is our device connection string. Next we have what protocol we're going to use. And we have a couple of options here. We can use MQTT, which is coming through most IT hubs. But in Azure we can also use AMQP or HTTP as a fallback. And should you have sort of firewalls, you can use MQTT and AMQP over WebSockets as well. The client, the next line here is the client that we're going to use to create the device client, and the message object is what we're going to use to send the message to the IoT Hub. This line is where we actually create our device client, and then we do open on this one to open our connection and get us connected to Azure. So now that we are connected, we should be able here to say, okay, let's read the sensor. So again, every 3 seconds, we're going to read this sensor. And this is where we're going to create the message and send that up to Azure IoT Hub using our device client. Now the first thing we need to do is actually create a message. So I have a message here called reading. So let's take this temp, put it in here. So now we have, let's call that date, time. This is called temp. So this is going to be the message that we send up to the cloud. And here we create that message using JSON. Then we send the device to the cloud. So let's just clean this code up a little bit. Should be good with that. And we can deploy this to our Raspberry Pi again. And move back to the terminal. So what we need here is actually to add these npm packages, the Azure IoT npm packages. So with our packages installed, we should be able to run the application again. So we connected to IoT Hub, we loaded the driver, and now we start sending those messages again every 3 seconds. And this gives us a good time to go into the Azure Stream Analytics to see what is actually happening there. So back in the portal, we're going to Stream Analytics. And Stream Analytics works in a way that you have inputs, query, and output. And I thought this was better presented before where these were actually aligned, where you have input, query, output, which made more sense. But what you do here, you create an input, and you can have either blob storage or IoT Hub. So you come into here now. Since this is running, I can't add any new input, but I have my IoT Hub as an input. Pretty much it's the same for the output. Now here you have many more options, but I've selected Power BI. And then you create this query where I select all the inputs and I output that into the Power BI output. Which leaves us to go to Power BI now, where we should be able to start looking into that report. So here in Power BI on my workspace, I have dashboards, reports, and I also have this data set that was now created from Stream Analytics. So we can look at this and build reports, like a tabular report where we can add a daytime and our temperatures. What you see here on the right side is the actual message that was sent out, and added some properties that was added by Stream Analytics. But we can look into the data this way. But we can make more interesting reports on our dashboard, where we come in and we can create a tile, we can create a live report here. We can select our data set. We can select what type of graph we want. We'll do a line chart. Select the date time. We can select the temperature. Set this to like for a 5-minute period of time. Apply that one. And now again, if we were to hold hard on the temperature, we should see this one increase or decrease a little bit. So here you can see it's rescaling, and now it's increasing. There you go. That's our first demo. So, with that demo in mind, with what I said in the beginning of this video, I think now is a good time to go back and reflect on what we've done and what is needed before we go into production. So just to recap a little bit, so we have our device, our Raspberry Pi with an attached temperature sensor. We imported some packages from NPM. We wrote some code that got those temperatures and submitted them up to IoT Hub. It's very simple and fair enough, but before you roll this out, you might think about how are you going to do provisioning, for example. You saw me running a script deploying that code to the device, which is fine in a development situation. But what if you have those 10,000 devices and you want to roll them out? That's going to be tricky for you. Secondly, it's about patching and updates. Now, if you need to change your code, how are you going to address 10,000 devices? You need a much more efficient way to do that. And then I also want you to draw the attention to the actual solution that we built. What you saw was this. You had one app.js file, which was very simple. But if we now get into the node modules folder, you'll see that there were a lot of dependencies that were installed, and each of those dependencies might change over time, might have bugs that needs to be changed, especially if it's security related issues, which is also true for your certificates and tokens, which generally have a lifetime, and if that lifetime expires and you need to change the certificate or token, how are you going to handle that? And before you even provide updates, you might need to do issue tracking to actually find which packet is wrong, or where is your bug, and how do you drill down to that code, possibly doing remote debugging and in other ways managing your code. And when you find that issue, you might just don't want to roll it out. You might have some release management tool that you want to use to properly plan your releases. All these issues can be addressed in our related videos. The next one is going to be pretty much the same demo as we did now, but using microServiceBus to provide a better device management experience. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you very much for watching.